We've got a full crew minus one. John Goss will not be with us tonight, so there's 6 of us here tonight. Our statement of purpose: the Development Authority of Alpharetta is granted the powers and jurisdiction through the State of Georgia General Assembly and a resolution adopted by the Alpharetta City Council on September 3rd, 1996. The function of this assembly is to promote the public good and general welfare, trade, commerce, industry, general tax base, and the employment opportunities available in the city of Alpharetta. So with that, we can go on to our consent agenda. We've got a few things for new business, and then Kathy's going to give us an update later on and Lance, on the economic development. But first thing on the consent agenda is the approval of minutes from the last meeting. Any thoughts, comments? Any motions?
Move approval to minutes.
Second.
All those in favor of approval? There we go. All right, so we're 6 for 6. Next on the agenda is the conflict waiver for the local jobs creation grant. Lance, are you going to go through that, or Melissa?
So that's just our run-of-the-mill conflict waiver, since our firm does represent both City Council and the Development Authority, who operate as independent bodies, and we are representing both sides in this transaction. It's a waivable conflict, so we just ask for approval on that.
So with that,
I'll make a motion to waive, or approve, sorry, the conflict resolution.
to execute the,
To execute the conflict resolution.
all those in favor? There we go, 6 for 6. So next on to new business. We've got 4 items on the new business. And I believe Woody is going to walk us through the first 2.
Thank you. I'll be brief and turn it over to Joe at Southwest Value Partners so he can do a presentation of what their plans are. But this is a bond inducement for 555 Windward Parkway, which is an existing 550,000 square feet Class B building. And they are going to invest, including the acquisition price and tenant improvements, roughly $110 million, really to modernize the building and bring it from what it is today to a modern Class A building that I think Alpharetta can be really proud of. So we've got a bond inducement for that. Jobs expected once it's complete, about 2,750 full-time jobs, like 500 construction jobs, and then some real estate design and property management professionals, around 50. So that's just sort of the basic summary. This is your standard run-of-the-mill office deal that we've done with you all for other projects. So I think the key right now is I'll come back and answer whatever questions you have. But I think, Joe, it's sort of your show to talk about what your plans are for the asset.
Good evening. So, I'm going to just do a brief presentation, show kind of our plans for the redevelopment of the building, and what we're really doing here at Continuum in Alpharetta. Joe Bucher, I'm with Southwest Value Partners. I'm the Managing Director for Design and Development Strategy for the firm. I am based here in the Southeastern United States, live in Nashville, actually live in Franklin, very, very close to here. I'm here at least once a month, spending time with tenants, spending time with brokers, spending time with our property. And we're excited kind of our big plans of what we're doing really at this property in the next phase here. So Continuum is an interesting project for us. It is a 52-acre site, sits on the northern end of the city. I just orient everybody to exactly where it is, and just we'll kind of go through and the development strategy, the development plans, really how it is. Shown in blue on this map, northernmost side, really it is kind of the three-legged piece of that stool with Avalon, downtown, where we're at right now. and then anchoring on Windward and West Side. Perfect access to Georgia 400. Like I said, it was a 52-acre site. It was originally an HP campus building, a lot of data center in it. You know, it's an aging office building, early 90s product. So, which means that, you know, the building itself is really like, think of it like two super Walmarts jammed together. That's the scale of kind of building that it is. We are going to fully renovate this as really a catalyst for a pretty big mixed-use development. We've gone through a pretty lengthy process to entitle the property, and we're ready to really see new tenants into this thing, which is about the driving in of new workforce into Alpharetta, and having this building as an attractive asset for people that are moving into the community or occupying the center. This is, I'm not going to completely redo the entire master plan, kind of go over everything, but overall it's about a 2 million square foot entitlement across the entire site, and it is truly mixed use. The idea there is office users want walkability, they want access to retail. The living that exists on the site and that's planned for the site, like both single family and multifamily, keeps that retail alive, keeps it vibrant, and you drive it all together with kind of green open space. Really makes it a great district on that northern end of the campus. That building, which is highlighted in blue, listed as, you know, listed as a 550,000 square foot building. It is not a small endeavor to try to figure those things out. You know, it's an old data center. It's an aging office building. It's a quick image of the outside. I don't think we do salmon-colored brick and green windows anymore. Probably not the best design decisions, but it was at the time. But what we've got to really think about is what people want today and what these tenants want today. So this is the new front of the building. These are the same image in the same location. Can't probably match the focal length, but you kind of get, it is a sense of arrival. It is about turning this from being an aging office product from the 90s into a creative office building of today. To do so, we're creating an internal street inside the building to link the front and the back sides of the property. This building really turns its back on West Side and Windward, and we're reversing that entire trend. So I'll show you in a minute. We're going to do some wonderful retail out on the corner and invite people back up into the site. And there's this public street, this is an image of that street, that connects one side of the property really to the other. Becomes a linkage, it becomes a creative office lobby, meaning that the tenants can come in here and directly access their suites like you can in a typical building, but it has kind of a more of an immediate cultural impact, meaning that there's cafes, gaming rooms, great conferencing facilities, and then even some tenants and some retail spaces that exist off that corridor. Making sure that that 500,000 square foot building is properly amenitized to attract the right tenants. We've added in things like, you know, excellent fitness that overlooks this really cool new mixed-use development in the center of the site, to making sure that you have indoor-outdoor space that properly relates to the way that people want to work today, which isn't necessarily sitting at a desk. It's about being in this overall community that we're really creating. So this is so if you could see this from Windward and West Side, because it's kind of obscured by trees, this is what it would look like. You kind of got to make your way through it, but this is what it will look like once all that new construction really starts. Looking at the front of the building, you know, this is the other side of that kind of internal street as it passes its way through. And then, you know, it's kind of a forgettable building right now, and the idea here too is like, the interior has got pretty good bones. Let's make that work. It's got great glass all around it, but let's freshen it up. Let's give it a new sense of presence. And when we see creative office buildings popping up around the country, the ones that we're doing or our competitors are doing kind of around the country, they have individualized lobbies and arrival points for these tenants and opportunities for those tenants to brand the space, which we think, especially in a community like Alpharetta, super important, like being able to have that kind of identity from the inside to the outside, and making that work for the way that modern office space really wants to. And then how do you take a data center and make it into leasable space? Because it's, like I said, it's a super Walmart. You know, it's just so massive. Cut a hole right through the middle of the building. So each one of these things, we have courtyards that are going into this. It's a pretty significant redevelopment, right? It gives you a modern lease span inside the building, and you can see flood the entire interior with natural light, creating kind of privatized spaces. Again, interior, exterior, always inside, outside, and then a view of the new corner of the building that we're really planning, kind of shows you how the lobbies interact. The new lobby is all the way on the far left side of the page. We're kind of the arrival point at the site. So, I've gone over a lot of things, but I think a big piece of how the building really works is the vision behind the overall project and how it ties into all those things. So this was that view from kind of the windward west side intersection, looking back at what is right now kind of a tired building, clear the trees away, and we will activate that corner with a brand new retail center. So this is not a heavy retail project. It's not like, this is not Avalon Part 2. This is the right amount of retail with, the amenity, that really provides the amenity that the workforce really wants. This is an office-first project. Scale of the building dictates that. It's a 500,000 square foot building. And then adding in the right little pieces of retail. This corner building is entitled for in a total, I think, 20,000 square feet, right? So this is not a massive kind of retail piece, but it's a piece of the overall puzzle to really make the overall project work. We will have residential that comes in this phase 2. I'm calling all of these kind of phase 2 together because we're trying to execute them all at the same time, which is some for sale, living, heads and beds, residential, and along with some multifamily, which will really keep that retail kind of vibrant and alive and really walkable. Provide another amenity for that office force really to be able to access that site. So as we tie all those parts and pieces together, this really shows you kind of the phase 1, phase 2, how we can see how the overall master plan, right, fits back in together in a pretty big swath. So we're able to execute each one of these things in a really aggressive and excellent way as it ties into kind of an overall vision for this corner of the project. So I said, try to keep this brief and kind of give you kind of an overview of where we're headed with the project. We are excited to be before you today, and I appreciate your time.
There's some additional buildings on there. Is that future phases?
Yeah, so it's phase. So what I've shown you is phase 1 is this office building. Phase 2 will be how we plug the rest of these parts and pieces all into it. In my mind, they're pretty linked together, like to make this all work.
But it looked like you had some additional office in there.
We do. So everything in blue, I'll go back to the master plan here. So Georgia 400 is on the right-hand side, Windward is at the top of the page, and West Side is on the left-hand side. The darker blue building is the existing building. You can kind of see our internal street that comes through it. That's the rehabilitated part. We have 3 additional office buildings entitled. Those are all envisioned in our mind for those opportunities, those build-to-suit opportunities for tenants, for life sciences, for lab, for so on and so forth. Those are all commercial office buildings, probably in a mixed-use nature.
Just curious, what kind of interest have y'all gotten from office tenants?
We were just talking about this before the meeting. It's gone in waves. We're still at in the throes of one of the most challenging office environments that we've ever experienced, most challenging of my career. The questions coming in, really surround 2 things. Like in its existing phase, there's a certain type of tenant that would occupy this building, and it's going to be very much a value play. What we're going after is all the ECD, economic community development opportunities that exist out there through the state of Tennessee, and then also through our connections. We do development in other places, and then reaching our tentacles into those kinds of things. Those inquiries are actually increasing. So we're seeing them larger, so rather than being a 10,000, 15, 20,000 square foot requirement, we're starting to see 40, 100,000 square foot requirements again, which is extremely positive. And we need things like this, obviously, to be able to entice those tenants to land. Deals are taking longer, and they're harder to do, but that's okay. We're ready to do it. We're patient about it. We really want this project to be super successful to be able to have this to offer. The build-to-suit stuff is much harder. There's a lot of options for people out there, and we'll be focused on it. And if that opportunity arises, we will go.
So your ask at this point with the bonds, is that covering phase 1 and 2 or phase
Covers
1?
phase 1 and part of 2.
Simply phase 1, sir, so just the redevelopment of the existing.
Sir, if you could come forward to the podium, please. Our request today is simply for Phase 1, the redevelopment of the existing office building, plus the land and site improvements that are specific to that office building.
So Woody, can you kind of walk us through how this will work? And, you know, some of the people have not been through one of our, you know, title.
Sure. So if this is successful, right, and then you all approve, we'll go to the next phase, which will be drafting all the documents with their lawyers and us and Melissa and you all. And we would come back to get a bond resolution approved. That would all be probably entered into, when are you trying to close on the real estate? Oh, you own it now. Great. So we can, as soon as we can get it done, we would proceed to a closing. And what that would do is it would freeze the assessed value on the office building that's there now at its current level. That would stay frozen until their renovations are done. And once the renovations are done, the property would then be reassessed by Fulton County. And then that would be year one of the leasehold schedule. And then at that year one, the assessed value would then be at 50%. They would pay taxes on the leasehold estate at 50%. And then every year that would go up. So 55, 60, 65. After 10 years, they pay full taxes, and this stays on the tax rolls.
So in terms of, you know, the tenant, are there tenants in there now in the 515,000?
Yes, sir, there are. They are really the tenants that we purchased the building from, and those leases are below market leases that will extend out.
And is your intent to keep them in while you're doing this, or?
Yes, we intend to execute the renovations while existing tenants are in the building. We have agreement from those tenants to do so.
So I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the information. Any thoughts, questions, comments?
Just a couple of questions. You do currently own the 50-some-odd acres. You've already closed on the entire site.
Correct.
This is a very important intersection for Alpharetta, so it's really important that you pull this off. It looks great. I'm very familiar with it. I co-developed the site with a savings loan out of San Antonio back in the early 90s. So it's old and tired and needs this renovation. So I think it looks great. One more explanation. Phase 1 is only the existing building, that HP building that currently exists.
That's correct, sir.
Okay. So,
What is your anticipated timeline on just the first phase?
We are ready to execute and move forward immediately, and our construction period is less than 1 year.
Okay.
Anybody else? Questions? They were kind enough to provide some additional information to us, and right now the taxes on the site are about $688, and once this is done, even with the abatement, the taxes are about $750. So even with the abatement, you know, the tax, Fulton County, the schools, they're not really giving up anything, because absent this, you know, it's really fast appreciating asset. So, but if no other thoughts, questions, comments, do we have any motions?
let me understand the motion. I move to approve. The inducement letter has been approved. Or that's what we're doing tonight?
Yeah, you would make a motion to approve the inducement resolution.
Yes, I make a motion to approve the inducement resolution.
Second.
All those in favor? 6 for 6. So we're looking forward to this, and hope it all goes well, and looking forward to working with you on it.
We are too. Thank you very much
Thanks.
for your support and trust in us. Congrats. Let's go to work.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is Woody to talk about Project Asphalt.
Great. This next project is a bond inducement request for Project Asphalt by CoreWeave, Inc. And this involves an existing data center that's located at 4905 North Point Parkway. And you might recall in the last meeting, or it was 2 meetings ago, I can't remember which, but there was an informational presentation by some consultants for the company, and the company had some people on the speaker. Since then, I think that they've changed the request a little bit. There was an initial phase that involved $158 million of generative AI equipment. That was phase 1 for them. Phase 2 was $234 million of generative AI, and then there's a future phase 3, potentially $225 million. They eliminated the phase 1 request for incentives for phase 1, and so they're just seeking incentives right now on phase 2, which is roughly $234 million of generative AI equipment in a data center. Just to remind everybody, when we talked about data centers last time, these projects, they don't create a lot of jobs, and so the estimated job creation is only 3 to 4 people. That's fairly consistent with data centers. The data centers are not big employment makers, but they are big capital investments. At this time, I think some of the representatives on behalf of CoreWeave are here, and I'm going to let them turn it over, and I'll come back and answer whatever questions you might have.
All right, let's make sure I do this correctly. All right. Oh, there we go. We did it. And I think I have a couple of people dialed in. Brian, Rich, Daryl, you guys there?
You do have all of your folks online. They are currently all muted, so those of you online, if you would unmute yourselves.
I'm here, Rich Rosenzweig with CoreWeave. It's a little hard to hear, I apologize.
Brian Anderson, I'm here as well.
Daryl Pearson is here as well.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for having us back. Blair Westmoreland with DMA on behalf of CoreWeave. And as hopefully everyone remembers from, I guess, 2 months ago that we came in and introduced this particular project. It is a data center project that is looking at the current, I guess it's the former BlackBerry data center, and now currently owned and operated by, now just drew a blank.
Ascent.
Well, yeah, Ascent, and there's a real estate provider also. But as it was mentioned earlier, there has been a little bit of shifts in requesting a phase 1 abatement. And the main reason behind that is when the high technology data center bill was potentially going to be removed from the state legislation, the company made some quick decisions on, they found a property that would work for phase 1, they executed a lease for phase 1, and they've now decided to go ahead and deliver some assets and put those assets in service because, you know, they're very happy with the property, they're very happy with the operator, and they have the power that can be provided for this particular phase. What has happened since then, there has been some struggles on the operator side on whether or not phase 2 and phase 3, more importantly phase 3, the power will be there and secured to move forward with all phases. So they have started looking elsewhere to support this data center and additional growth. They've been looking around Fulton County in a couple of the existing co-location centers, and we've also looked at some properties outside of Fulton County, both up in Gwinnett and down in South Fulton, or not South Fulton, down in Fayette County on the south side. The company would still like to move forward with an inducement for phase 2. And I'll jump forward. So right now, phase 2, again, the first phase, they look to be operational by third quarter, so right around the corner with around $158 million. That's within 7,500 square feet. They're estimating 5 jobs with an average salary of around $75,000 with benefits. Phase 2, which could be operational Q1 is of 2025, they could invest up to $234 million in an additional 9,200 square feet, adding another 3 to 4 jobs. And then the phase 3 that's really ultimately in question as they continue to grow would be an additional $200 million for that particular phase. The interesting thing about data centers, if you're not aware, after about 6 years, they need to completely refresh. And so you're looking at around the same amount in capital spend to refresh the equipment. So ultimately, a project of this size could be close to $1.2 billion to refresh and maintain these data centers within the community. And I know right now we're talking about, really strongly inducing phase 2, because I think that helps to, continue the traction within Alpharetta, within this data center, knowing that there are still some uncertainties with phase 3. I think it would definitely help alleviate some of the costs associated and the tax burden with this type of investment, but also just, it would just give that extra, reason for the company to continue to, push for the additional power requirement for phase 3. And it's my understanding that it would also require some additional build out and buildings for that particular data center to support that. Anybody on the call want to add anything?
This is Rich. The only thing I will add is that even though these facilities are not as job intensive, the key here is the sort of surrounding industries that they attract because of the infrastructure and what we bring to that. So it's really the sort of types of industries we serve in the AI world, machine learning, graphics, media, and entertainment. So that's the only thing I would add.
And I know we shared some tax modeling, because I know that was a lot of the questions, was really understanding what a personal property tax abatement could look like, especially for this sort of project, this sort of structure, knowing that there's refresh on the horizon. And, hopefully you all have had an opportunity to look at that. I wanted to make sure we highlighted some numbers to make it a little bit easier when combing through. We have been looking at a 6-year window, knowing that the assets have about a 6-year life.
One quick question. On phase 1, what is the length of the lease you've signed for the data center?
Rich, the question was, what's the length of the phase 1 lease that has been signed currently?
Alan, you're better suited to that than I am.
Hey, Rich, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. The question was asked regarding the length of the phase 1 lease.
Yeah, the current lease, I believe, is a 12-year lease. I believe. I have to double check that though.
I believe that's correct.
So it's a 12-year lease with no kick out at, after the first 5 or 6 year period?
That's correct. We don't normally have options out of these commitments.
All right, so you're fully committed, at least on phase 1, for the existing time and refresh then, is what I'm getting.
That's correct.
So you said you weren't sure if they had the sufficient power for phase 3. It also sounded like you weren't sure they had sufficient power for phase 2 also.
Rich, you want to touch on, and Alan, you want to touch on the current conversations with the operator regarding power?
The only thing that I could add to that is, and Alan, you should supplement this, is I believe that with respect to phase 2, the power is there. We are having discussions with the new operator on a wide ranging of issues, of which power is just one. And there is ongoing internal discussions, as I understand it, with the power provider, and those issues have not been resolved yet.
If you were to find out that phase 3 power wouldn't be sufficient for phase 3 prior to any commitment to phase 2, would you still proceed with phase 2?
I can't speak to that. So let me just make sure, and I apologize, the speaker's just a little hard to hear. Was the question, would we proceed with phase 2 if we didn't have agreement previously with respect to the power for phase 3? Was that the question?
Yes, or if you had been informed that it wasn't going to be sufficient.
For phase 3?
Yes, sir.
I can't exactly speak to that, but oftentimes we enter into these agreements and we do have customer obligations. We would likely go ahead with phase 2 given customer obligations if the power is, given that the power is there.
And just to echo that, we do have a customer already lined up with the phase 2 expansion. So I don't believe we have any intention, if the power could be provided for phase 2, not to execute.
Just to take that same question a little further, assuming you don't have the adequate power for phase 2 and 3, you got a 12-year lease, what's the plan? I mean, are you going to sublease the building? I mean, what's the...
For phase 1, I think the power for phase 1 has been secured.
My question
I'm sorry, apologies.
Go ahead. I think you...
For phase 1 and phase 2, phase 1, we're moving forward as we speak. So for phase 1, the power supply is there. For phase 2, we're pretty confident of that. I can't speak to, perhaps Alan can, who's responsible for our leases, what the outcome would be if the power was not there for phase 3, given our 12, existing lease term.
Sure. The only thing I would say is we're contractually committed for phase 1 and 2. We don't have a contract for phase 3 because there's nothing in contract yet for. As soon as we get more, as soon as the power is available for us, where we would be open to immediately contract for that power. Right now, our provider has nothing to offer us to contract with.
I have a question. This is probably going to, I apologize for my ignorance when it comes to data centers. I know we're not putting like laptops in there, but at least as far as I know, while I've been here, this is the first time we've done this on personal property versus real property. So, what sort of assurances, if there is a better, shinier data center that comes up because they're being built everywhere, is there ever the opportunity to move this, to say, this is personal property? It is. I mean, you were able to put in $158 million worth between the meeting 2 months ago and third quarter of this year. What sort of restrictions on that? And I may be stepping where we don't really need that. I don't know, but it's just, I'm curious, since it is something different than what we've done before.
Sure. Alan, do you want to touch on the 12-year lease and why it would make sense to not pick up and move to a shinier data center down the road at the current time?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. These are very, besides the personal property that we have going into the data centers, we spend a lot of money, very capital intensive, getting the actual physical property ready for our use. So there is some contribution from the landlord and the operator, but there's a considerable fit out in order to make this, these facilities applicable to our use. So we don't just pick up and leave. We don't just pick up the GPUs and the personal property that are there. We don't really move them around because we have a customer who's using them. They're active. We expand. We don't just decommission.
And Woody, question for you. So this is personal property, not real property.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry to interrupt, but if you could get a little closer to that microphone.
So this is personal property, not real property. Does it follow the same abatement schedule? So 50, 45, 40? So over a
Yes.
10-year period?
Yeah, it definitely does. It's still a 10-year. And then with all personal property, there are a couple different classes of depreciation. So the taxpayer, this kind of personal property fits into one of those classifications, which will depreciate it. Obviously, that reduces the value just by normal depreciation rules. But the incentive is the same over a 10-year period. So any refresh, let's say they did a refresh in year 7 of the equipment, and you're down to maybe a 20% value on the taxes, be a 20% on that refreshed equipment.
Okay.
So it ends after 10 years, though.
Okay.
Yep.
Other thoughts, questions, comments? Part of me is asking the question, does this meet the requirements of our obligation here with the Development Authority, when we look at our objectives? And you can chime in here too, but
Sure.
just to repeat those objectives, the function is to promote the public good and general welfare, trade, commerce, industry, general tax base, and employment opportunities available in the city of Alpharetta. So it's really, it's not, adding on the employment opportunities, but, it would be adding trade, commerce, industry, and general tax base. So other thoughts, comments?
The nice thing about data centers, they don't put a strain on your public utilities outside of power. And hopefully they'll have secure power for all the phases in the future.
So would this be, if we went forward with this and assuming, I guess.
Sean, your microphone.
If we did vote in favor of this, it would be contingent, obviously, on phase 2, you deciding to proceed forward with that. Would it be for a 12-year term then? Would the lease for the phase 2 be the same? Are you already under lease for phase 2 and not 3? Is that what he had said earlier?
And Alan, I'll let you confirm if phase 2 has been executed. I know with questions with the power, I don't know if phase 2 is fully secured.
This is Rich. For some reason now, the connection's a little tough. So I believe that the phase 2 is secure with respect to power and customers. CoreWeave is a pretty committed company, as it was said before. We just, we don't pick up GPUs and move. We've moved into several facilities in Georgia, in Lithia Springs, Douglasville, another facility in Swanee. So we're committed to the state and localities that we're in. So we don't, as Alan stated before, we just don't pick up GPUs and move on. But Alan, can you just confirm that the lease and the power with respect to phase 2 is secure and committed. Okay, we're probably having,
We may have lost Alan.
Yeah, I'm having some tech. Response was dated phase 2, and then I heard someone speaking, but I couldn't make out the question.
The question was if the Phase 2 lease has been secured and if the power is adequate for Phase 2, and you guys are ready to move forward with Phase 2, or is there still some conversations around securing power and moving forward with Phase 2?
Yeah, yes. So we are contracted for phase 2.
Well, thank you. Thoughts, questions, comments, motions?
Were you able to hear that? I'm sorry.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Yes, we are contracted for phase 2, and we are moving forward with phase 2 per the contract.
One question on the phase 3 power. When will you have more clarity around that?
Alan, when will we receive clarity from the operator on power for Phase 3?
Yeah, I don't have a definitive answer to that. It's a little bit outside of our control, and I don't have an exact update for that.
Thank you.
And this ask at this point is for Phase 2.
For Phase 2.
Would your expectation to come back for Phase 3?
The expectation, yes, would be to come back for Phase 3.
Coming back on Phase 3, is that just going to piggyback on Phase 2, or is that a new inducement on top of that? So that would be the start date when they come back?
And Woody, I don't know if, the question was, would we be able to piggyback Phase 3 on this inducement, or would we have to come back almost like a new project? Or could we set it up?
Yeah, I think the request right now is just for phase 2. There's been no formal request for phase 3, so they would come back for a phase 3 request. At least that's where we stand right now.
If, Mr. Chairman, if I may, just to add some clarity here, they did just state that Phase 2, that lease was signed, and the but-for test, is called into question with that. So just consider that information to the board.
One more time, I'm a little slow understanding this, Woody. This is only an inducement for the personal property of Phase 2. There's no real estate, no other tax involved. Based on that, I will make a recommendation to approve the letter of inducement for the personal property on Phase 2 only, and you'd have to return for Phase 3 if that goes forward, would be my recommendation.
Those in favor? We'll do it.
Thank you all. We appreciate it. We'll see you soon, especially if we can get that power. We'll be back really soon.
Thank you, everybody online as well.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, we're moving on to the Local Jobs Creation Grant, IGA, the Intergovernmental Agreement.
Mr. Chairman, I'll go over that with you all. So the Local Job Creation Grant, I know the board is somewhat familiar with this with this incentive. This is an IGA to continue that program for the next fiscal year. The City Council approved that in their council meeting on last Monday. In short, the goal of the local job creation grant is to incentivize the hiring and retention of Alpharetta residents by area companies, either expanding into the community or existing in the community. And to be eligible for this incentive, you have to also be eligible for some of the state of Georgia's economic development incentives. And so this grant was created in part to be a complement when offering incentives to large-scale economic development projects. Director Cook and I, use judicious judgment on this when we respond to requests for information with companies, major corporate relocations such as Morgan Stanley last year. This incentive was offered to them, and we expect within this current fiscal year they could come seek that incentive. And so happy to answer any questions that you all have. It's been in the Economic Development Toolkit for about a decade now, a little more.
Is it a pretty rigorous application process to take advantage of that?
Yes. So in short, it would actually come before this board. We have an application document that they fill out. They have to meet certain standardization of a timeline. So the jobs can't be cashed in on unless the employee has been there for at least a year. They also have to prove that the employee is a City of Alpharetta resident, and that's something, of course, staff can easily check by checking residential home addresses through the GIS system. And that comes before you all with a recommendation from staff, and it would be a direct payout approved by you all. I will say that because we do use it judiciously and it is not an infinite pot of cash, it's not something that we have seen regularly used. We've seen two companies, including one of which, a rather major one, was Fiserv, about a decade ago, did seek the incentive and took a large portion of the original allocation by City Council.
I remember maybe several meetings ago you mentioned it was not well known and taken advantage of. Have y'all thought about making it a little easier to apply? And
yeah, I mean, that's a great question. It's something certainly the direction from both this board and the City Council to kind of amend and buttress some of our economic development incentives, making this potentially not only more readily available, but either by way of larger funds that could be sought through City Council or through this authority, if that's a direction that both entities wanted to seek, that would be an option. And certainly, we make companies aware of it, like your Morgan Stanleys, things like that. So that's absolutely something we could do more of and potentially continue to build out moving forward. So happy to entertain that feedback, certainly.
So as far as the limited use of it, is it more just people knowing about it, or is it the process of doing it to get it?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a little bit of both. I would say one of the reasons we've been judicious about it, as it currently stands, it's not a large sum of money. You could have one large employer come, wipe a large swath of that out, and that's something we keep in mind, knowing taxpayer dollars, using that judiciously and working through, the prerogatives of both this board and the City Council. So that's part of the reason. And we have offered it and made it available to companies. Sometimes it's just not something they have gotten to come cash in on, so to speak, even though it is, we make it clear to them they're eligible. We outline it in a request for information when we submit it to the state. But part of the incentive, kind of the invisible effect of this incentive, is it is something that is kind of a cherry on top, so to speak. A lot of local communities outside of a bond inducement don't really have a lot of localized economic development incentives in Georgia. It's all focused on the state level. And so when we kind of add this to a curated response, this kind of puts Alpharetta in a unique position of having something as an added benefit that a lot of communities just don't have. In short, somewhat like some of the grant opportunities the Development Authority has also created, like the Connect Forward grants, kind of that creativity kind of shows the direction and mindset of the city, and the authority is one of pro-business and things like that. So that is kind of the invisible effect of this incentive, if you will.
And I just, from prior discussions, I think it's just, the opportunity to have it and offer it. If it's not used, it's not used. But it's something to offer and that is available to people. I believe we also have a separate, lesser requirement for the Tech Alpharetta. So if someone is a graduate of Tech Alpharetta, there's a lower hurdle to hit.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. A number of years ago, the Economic Development Department did create that as kind of an added higher priority, if you will, to applicants seeking it from Tech Alpharetta incubating companies that are kind of rolling off into the community. So that's where you see that range from the $250 to $500 direct payment. That incentive is sweetened, if you will, with the Tech Alpharetta Association.
So with that,
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution.
A second.
those in favor? There we go. 6 for 6. And finally, on new business. Woody.
So I think that's the last agenda item before Kathy may do a presentation. Are you doing a presentation? Oh, no. Okay. This is probably the easiest thing we've talked about so far. In 2006, this authority issued tax-exempt bonds to renovate an apartment complex. And those bonds were paid off 2 years ago when the current owner acquired the facility. When you issue tax-exempt bonds for multifamily housing, there are some restrictions that are required by the federal government in order for the bonds to be tax-exempt. One of them is a set-aside of a certain percentage of the units at low and moderate income. Those burn off, and there's a 3-part test as to when those burn off. And the key here is it's 15 years following 50% occupancy. And that date is approaching in September. I think it's September 19th of this year. So the bonds that you all issued for this project have been paid off. The new owner, those restrictions burn off by themselves in September, where they have the ability then to take it all market rate. And all they're looking to do is to clean their title up from a legal perspective and have a termination of that land use restriction agreement filed in September. So we'll hold it in escrow and get it filed when the date hits. They just are looking to clean up their title as the current owner. And so we would just need a motion to approve the execution of the termination of the land use restriction agreement. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
I'll make a motion to approve.
All those in favor? Here we go.
Thank you.
6 for 6. And finally, Lance and Charlotte.
So I'm happy to give an economic development update to you all. So Economic Development Department stays busy as always. Recently, within the past month, since we saw you last, we hosted a commercial real estate breakfast. We're actually, Mr. Booker with Continuum Development, as well as Tower Wakefield with TPA Lakeview came and did an overview on their projects to commercial real estate brokers in the community, which was fairly well intended. We're trying to build out that in a more regular cadence where we're having kind of these regular commercial real estate updates, especially as we work to continue to help fill our office space in this post-COVID market. So something we put together last month that hoping to make a more regular occasion of. The city of Smyrna came to tour with us, as always. I think we've told you, the board before. We kind of have tour season here where downtown Alpharetta has become a shining beacon upon the hill, if you will, for a lot of communities. And they came to tour and see kind of how to activate their downtown space, their village space a bit more. And so Kathy, Charlotte, and I got to meet with them. That was a fun opportunity. A few really cool small businesses coming in the community have opened up in the last month as well. Off Leash right here in downtown, restaurant, bar, dog park use, very unique. Got to attend the ribbon cutting a few weeks ago. Seems to be already a roaring success. See a lot of dogs out there. Really cool concept, and you don't even have to have a dog. You can go in there and grab a bite to eat and watch other people's dogs, which my wife and I have since done as folks that don't have dogs yet. We are going to be the sponsors for the FinTech South Conference, one of the sponsors for the FinTech South Conference at the end of this month in downtown Atlanta or midtown Atlanta, being that Alpharetta is kind of the heartbeat of the financial tech industry in Atlanta. It's absolutely something that we have kind of prioritized some of our marketing funds towards. We were a t-shirt sponsor for them as well last year. So looking forward to that. Charlotte, Kathy, and I will be down there representing the city later this month. Doing some more kind of conferences. Kathy attended the Bio Life Science Conference in San Diego back in June. Again, as the city has kind of targeted to build out the life science space. This is our second year that the state of Georgia has invited us to that conference and kind of represent that industry as it's a burgeoning industry in North Fulton as a whole. And I had the opportunity to attend Select USA in Washington, D.C., which is a foreign direct investment conference where we had companies from all over the world to come. State of Georgia invited us to participate in that as a booth sponsor as well. So definitely keeping the city on a national and international footprint, if you will. And Boarding Pass Coffee, they originally had their start over in Milton on the north side of Highway 9, and they've expanded to 2 locations here in the city of Alpharetta, one off Old Milton Parkway, just to the east of Georgia 400. That's been open since about the spring, and they've had a soft opening at their downtown location, which is where the Crave Pie was right here in City Center. So we're actively working with their management to coordinate a ribbon cutting. Very excited to kind of have a coffee offering on this side of downtown. We've got Valor and Warm Waves, of course, on the other side of Main Street, so this would be a nice addition to this part of downtown. And with that, that's a few economic development updates that I have, and happy to take any questions or feedback the board may have for staff. You're welcome.
I guess with that, anything else that anybody wants to bring up? All right, well, with that, I guess we are adjourned.